Welcome. This is David Parra with AARP Arizona. And today we have another very important topic on long-term care. As we have been saying, this is a series, a Facebook series, and our task is to share with you information on long-term care. And today we're going to be talking about how to pay for it. And the biggest payer of long-term care is the ALTCS program here in Arizona. And with me today is Regan Smith, long-term care ombudsman program director with the Area Agency on Aging Region 1. Regan, thank you so very much for joining. I know we're all busy and I appreciate you making time to join us.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Perfect. I'm going to be asking you a series of questions, but before I do, let me just review with our audience as I always have done in pretty much every show. And what I do basically is let folks know what we're talking about here. So long-term care, it's a range of services and supports that help with activities of daily living. And these could be bathing, dressing, toileting, transferring to or from bed or chair, care for incontinence, and eating. So this is the type of care we're talking about. And it's usually not paid for by the regular insurance. There's also instrumental activities of daily living, housework, managing money, taking medications, preparing and cleaning up after meals, etc. You can pause the video. You can, I'm sure if you've been following the videos, the shows, you have heard me repeat this. And another thing is that where is this care delivered? Usually at home. Believe it or not, 80% of this type of care that we're talking about is delivered, offered at home. 80% of it, and it could be by unpaid caregiver, like who may be a family member, but it also can be a paid caregiver. Another point that we would like to highlight is that there's also community support services like adult daycare services centers, transportation services, etc. We covered this on our last show. And last point on this brief review is that this also can be done not only at home in the community, but also in nursing facilities. And so this is the scope of the services and who offers it and where. And now we have been covering about how to pay for this care. This is kind of like a missing link, I believe, in our healthcare system. We somehow there's a high percentage that tells us that we all are going to need or that will need long-term care when we get older. But for some reason, many of us do not prepare for it, and there is a way to prepare for it, but for some reason, we just kind of put it off. But so that's why we're having these shows. So who pays for it? Medicare pays for some of it, regular insurance, long-term care insurance could help a lot, public programs such as the ones we cover. And today we come to Medicaid. Medicaid in Arizona is Access, and part of that Access program, or the part that pays for long-term care, it's called, and here we go, ALTCS. So, Regan, sorry, I was going to call you Lisa. Regan, thank you again. So let us define just briefly, and we just want to tell our folks that we are going to just kind of stay on the basic elements. We're not going to dive too deep into this. The main thing is for you to know that there is such a thing and that you apply if you think you need this care. But to help us understand, Regan, the program, what is the ALTCS program?
So really, just quick summary, the ALTCS program is part of the state's Medicaid program, like you were talking about. It's part of Access, and it specifically provides the long-term care portion of Access at little or no cost. There are, of course, the financial and the medical eligibility requirements, but it's for Arizona residents who are older adults, blind, disabled, or have a developmental disability. And it provides long-term care services for that group.
Typically, when we say that, it's basically the program pays for that services, correct? Do they manage the services or just paid for the service, this ALTCS program?
So ALTCS manages the program too when somebody qualifies for this program. And of course, we'll talk a little bit about the criteria to qualify for ALTCS. people are provided with a case manager with one of the ALTCS plans, they call them. And that case manager helps to manage that person's care, care coming into their home or care within a long-term care type facility.
And before we go into the criteria, Regan, where does HCBS comes from? I know that when we talk about long-term care, I get the majority of us may just think immediately nursing home, but there's such a thing as an HCBS, which stands for community home and community-based services. What is that all about?
So ALTCS also helps to pay for those home and community-based services, both in the individual's own home, caregivers coming into that home, adult day health care, home health coming in, services that the person needs to live in their own home through the ALTCS program. Also included in home and community-based services are assisted living facilities. That's considered home and community-based services. So that would be the larger assisted living centers where someone has their own apartment, smaller assisted living homes, as well as adult foster care.
Got it. So now let's go into the general requirements. Can you basically review the general requirements? I think you kind of mentioned them, but please do again if you don't mind.
Sure. It's for Arizona residents who are aged, older adults, blind, disabled, or have a developmental disability. The applicants also must be determined to need the nursing home level of care, which we'll talk about a little bit later, be a citizen or a qualified immigrant, have a social security number, or they need to apply for one, be an Arizona resident, which means that they have come to Arizona and have intent to stay in this state. It's my understanding that there isn't a time frame. Like you get here to Arizona and then you have to wait 30 days.
Right,
you have to have intent to stay. And live in an approved living arrangement. So that could be in your own home or a contracted nursing home or assisted living type facility that's contracted with the Medicaid program.
Perfect. So, typically I would have put the income requirements first, but I thought, wait a minute, the medical requirements in this particular case, if I apply for an Access acute care plan, I don't have to have any condition. If I have the income limits and I meet the criteria, they'll give me a plan. I don't have to be sick. I don't have to be in any need of care. I can get a plan. But for this particular ALTCS, for the long-term care piece, you have to meet a medical requirements, and that's why I put this first, Regan. Would you mind helping us understand what these requirements are all about?
Sure, you're absolutely right. It's really important for people to understand that to qualify for Arizona's ALTCS program, Arizona Long-Term Care, you need to meet the medical requirements. There are financial requirements too that people need to meet, which we'll talk about later. But the medical requirements are really important. You need to require the nursing home level of care. You have to be at immediate risk of institutionalization in a nursing facility. And require that level of care. It doesn't mean that you currently live in a nursing home at that level of care. You can be in your own home. You can be in an assisted living facility and apply for this program, but you need to require that level of care. So they do, go ahead.
Yeah, so basically, and this matter of the points, and why do I think the point system is important? And because I was reading that this is where the person has to really convey all the symptoms when they're doing this survey, because they may miss something and that something may equal to 20 points, for example. Can you just elaborate just a little bit on that?
Sure. That's what they call the PASS, or the pre-admission screening, where a nurse or a social worker goes through this assessment with the person who's applied for the program to determine their medical eligibility. And it is a point system. The applicant needs to get 60 points based on their need for care. So it really looks at their activities of daily living, like you were talking about earlier. How much assistance do I need getting dressed, using the bathroom, taking a shower, brushing my hair, transferring in and out of bed, because those are needs someone has who lives in a licensed nursing facility. So they look at not only your medical diagnoses, but also primarily how much hands-on assistance you need. And this is really important. And I think the medical requirements often are forgotten about. So we get these stories all the time of people who move into assisted living facilities, which can be very expensive. And they're told at admission, well, you can spend down your money and live here and then apply for Arizona's ALTCS program, and you'll qualify because you've spent down your money here, and then you can continue to live here and your care will be paid for by ALTCS. When in reality, some of those folks don't meet the medical requirements. So yes, they've passed the financial part, which I know we'll talk about later, but they don't meet the medical requirement. And now all of their assets have been spent down.
Wow. This is extremely important to understand because, again, this facility may be thinking, oh, of course, your income is fine, but if they don't have the medical requirements, Access is not going to approve to pay for that service, right?
Correct.
Wow. Another point that caught my attention, Regan, was that if somebody is embarrassed to admit, for example, of the problem of incontinence, this, I believe, is worth like 20 points in this point system that they're going to use. And it really caught my attention because here there's no room for being embarrassed. You have to be very upfront because that can affect the point system, right?
Absolutely. You're correct with that. And we tell people who are applying for the program, yes, you need to be very clear about all the help you need. This isn't the time to say you can run 10 miles if you can't.
Right.
You need to be honest about the care needs that you have, because each and everything you talk about is important. And we often recommend that a family member or a friend can participate when this evaluation process happens, because family or friends, spouse often knows what this person's day-to-day looks like, where the resident or client or applicant might not feel comfortable talking about those things.
And at some point, we're going to get a question about this, but let me just address it now. It may be in some cases where the person maybe or should assign or designate a person to kind of handle that process, depending on circumstances. But is that something that we see often where a family member or friend may be designated formally to take care of that person's needs?
Sure, and anyone can assist an individual to apply for this program. The individual doesn't have to apply on their own. Another person can act on their behalf and be part of the application process and act as their representative and participate in the medical evaluation as well as the financial.
Okay, so now let's move. So we've covered basic or general requirements. We've covered the medical, which is, to me, very important because this is the key. I mean, like, I loved what you shared about the nursing home. If they may welcome you and they want you there, but if you don't have the medical requirements fulfilled, ALTCS is not going to pay for anything. So that is so important. So now let's move to the income criteria. This is 300% of federal poverty level. The ACCESS program uses 138%. So the ALTCS allows you to keep a little bit, actually, twice as much, around twice as much. And then another thing is that you must apply for all eligible benefits. You must apply as part of this process. And here we have the sources that are accountable. I really want to just basically ask you about this limit. So 2,382 is what the income limit. And then comes the issue of whether you are married or not. Can you tell us a little bit about how this amount is calculated if a person is single or if a person is married?
Sure. So if someone is single and they're applying for the program, meaning they don't have a spouse, they're not married, they look at their total gross income, and it can't be more than that 2382. So that, of course, as you have listed here, includes income from all sources. And like you said, they have to apply for other potential sources of income that maybe they haven't applied for, like VA benefits. Because you might hear that ALTCS is a payer of last resort. So that means they pay after everything else is exhausted. And they also look at income. So if you have a potential other source of income that could help contribute to pay for your care, they want that to be applied for, so that the portion they pay is less, because people do need to contribute some of their income towards their care.
Right.
So that's important to remember. But the other part of that is the trust. So if someone's income is higher than the 2382, because ALTCS has to have a line in the sand somewhere related to income, so they allow people to set up what they call an income-only trust. So that's important to keep in mind, that there are ways where someone could still be eligible if they meet the medical criteria, the asset criteria, but they have a little higher income than the 2382. They can talk to the person at Access when they apply about how to set up an income-only trust and what that looks like.
Okay, so let's spend just a few minutes, because and by the way, let's make this into a multi-number program. We're not gonna rush it. We're not gonna try to finish this in one show. So let's do this, and I actually name it Part 1. So let's kind of stay here for just a bit. So here's a person who happens to have. Well, in terms of the couple, I understand that if there's a couple and only one applies, if the person, so then I think they combine the two incomes and divide it by 2. Is that how they figure it out if they're a couple?
So yes, that's one way to figure it out. So if there's a married couple and one is applying for the program and the other is not, they look at the total income and divide it by 2. And if it's under that 2382, the income criteria is met. Or they can take, if that half exceeds the 2382, they can also look at only the customer's income and compare that to the income limit of 2382. So it's either or.
Perfect. Now, so let's say now that you mentioned this spend down concept, let's talk about that, because so here's a case, just to keep it simple. Let's say this is an individual, right? Or actually, it doesn't have to be. It could be married, but they exceeded the income requirement, and you mentioned a Miller Trust, and I have a whole definition here about Miller Trust that I am not going to ask you neither to read it, but I just want to make it to ask you to explain it in the simplest way that you can. So the whole idea is, I have too much income in my hands. What can I do so that I meet the income criteria, because I just have a little bit either too much or exceeded the limit? What is one thing that they can do that would allow them to qualify with this matter of the irrevocable trust, the income only or Miller irrevocable trust? Go ahead.
Sure. Income only trusts are for people whose income is over that ALTCS limit. We're just talking about income, not assets at this point, just to be clear. This is just for people who are over that income of 2382. They can set up what they call a special trust, an income-only trust or a Miller's trust, so that the person can qualify in terms of their income, keeping in mind that they also look at the assets, which we'll talk about later, and then, of course, keeping in mind that there's the medical criteria. So all of those are simultaneous. So then the income is deposited into that trust. which can help determine eligibility. So it's counted towards that person's share of costs, but doesn't impact the income criteria of the 2382. So it's a way to deal with that issue when people's income is sometimes just a little bit over the 2382, or it could be quite a bit over the 2382, but they don't have enough income to pay for nursing home care, which we all know is very, very expensive. So you could have an income of $3,000 a month, and that still is not enough to pay for nursing home care in a skilled nursing facility if that's what's needed.
Okay, so let me think here. So I have this extra $1,000, $2,000 that is coming to me on a monthly basis that is over the limit that would disqualify me. So that means that on as I get paid, that money is going to keep going to the trust. Is that am I getting it right?
Right.
That
Only the income can be deposited into that trust, and then Access is named as the beneficiary of that trust. If the trust ever ends, Access would be the beneficiary of anything left in the trust.
So that money eventually, it's almost like Access saying, you know what, you should be paying for that because you have this money, but if you put it in there, I'll provide the care. And at one point, that trust has to be under my name, so I'll be able to get that money from the trust, correct?
If there's anything left in the trust, Access would be the beneficiary, but the income going through the trust is not counted. The overage is not counted for the income eligibility, but it is counted towards that individual's share of cost to the facility. Because individuals pay a portion of their care depending on what their income is.
So the idea here is just to put that money into the trust to qualify, to meet the income criteria.
Correct.
And you mentioned share of cost. So what does that come in relationship to the money being placed in the trust?
So Access determines how much someone pays towards their care based on their income. So if someone has this trust and their income is over the 2382, that's still counted towards their share of cost. And Access determines all that upon application.
Perfect.
So, and Access, when they apply, can tell them if they need an income-only trust, who to contact about setting up an income-only trust, as well as contacting our agency. The senior helpline can give out information for that as well.
So nobody should disqualify themselves, correct? Anybody who has this medical needs that they need to pay for long-term care or nursing home level of care, they shouldn't disqualify themselves. They should apply and then go through the process. And I'm sure that they will be able to know whether that's the right thing for them. It may not be. It may be that they should just pay for it if it's going to be done at home and they have the money or what have you. But in the process, they'll be able to tell all that. And all we are saying is do not disqualify yourself. Go through the application process, correct?
Or at least call the Access office to talk to them about eligibility. We want to encourage people to apply. A lot of people out there don't know that this program exists. We get calls at our agency, our senior helpline, the ombudsman program every day, wondering, how am I going to pay for long-term care? My mom is running out of money. What is out there to help pay for this? So it's important for people to know about and to start an application to see if they are eligible.
Perfect. So that we don't make this video too long, let us stop here. Regan Smith, she is the Director of Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program with the Area Agency on Aging Region 1. I want to really thank you. This is only the first part, and I'm glad you're working with me because I really want this to go kind of slow, and even though we do 2 or 3 shows, it would be fine. But again, Regan Smith, thank you so very much for joining our show today.
Thank you. Have a great day.
We'll see you next time. And help us spread the word. All of you who are watching this show, we'll continue. This is a Facebook series. So I'll see you at our next show. Take care.